Morning, John. Super excited to have you on the Teacher's Point of View podcast. Obviously, you've had a remarkable journey. You've written books. You've progressed in your career. Can you just give everyone a bit of a background of who you are and sort of how you've got to where you've got to?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on this morning. It's great to kind of finally chat. I've been in teaching now for nearly 20 years. I started off through what some people might remember as the Graduate Teacher Program, the GTP, which I suppose is now maybe what the kind of school direct approach is now, really, in terms of working in a school and doing that. So I'd been a football coach before that. I'd been out to America a couple of times to coach football. Did my GTP, my NQT year. As a trained PE teacher, and then moved through the ranks into pastoral middle leadership, and that was what really got me started in terms of thinking about my own career development. Moved into assistant head of year, then head of year, then into assistant head teacher, who was responsible for really all the pastoral side of the school, safeguarding, behaviour, exclusions, all the nice stuff, just really enjoyed that. Did that I was an assistant head teacher for about 7 years, and did 2 or 3 different roles, including teaching and learning after that, and raising achievement. Then moved into deputy headship, deputy head for 6.5 years, responsible for teaching and learning, professional development, and teacher training in more recent times in terms of director of the teaching school. And then more recently, right now, I've just we were discussing kind of off air a second ago how I've kind of changed roles within lockdown, which has been quite strange, and I've got a new role now as Deputy CEO of Multi-Academy Trust, the Arete Learning Trust up here in North Yorkshire, and started that on July the 1st, so right smack bang in the middle of when schools were closed. So that was a very strange experience in terms of interviewing via Zoom, and kind of, I suppose, what we're doing now, but with a little bit more pressure on that interview. I've been doing that kind of since July. Really enjoy it. We've got 3 secondary schools up in some beautiful North Yorkshire market towns up here in North Yorkshire. So that's a little bit about me. I've written 4 books for Bloomsbury Publishing. Started out blogging and tweeting probably, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, about the things I was doing in my classrooms, things I was seeing at conferences, and really got the vibe and the buzz for, I suppose, teachers who are writing being more authentic, because they're at the chalk face actually doing the job, rather than kind of, I suppose, professors and educationalists that aren't in the classroom anymore or have never been in the classroom potentially. So caught that bug, started writing, and 4 books later I'm still enjoying it. So that's a bit of a plotted history of what I've done and who I am, and how I've got to where I am now.
Fantastic. Where does this creativity come from? I mean, you've progressed, right? Not everyone goes through the progression routes that you have in the 15-20 years that you've been teaching. I mean, you've progressed so much. Obviously, deputy CEO now. I mean, what is it about you that separates you from other people in the way that you teach, and like the inspiration that you get, the motivation that you get to get up get out of bed in the morning to go there and deliver fantastic lessons, and then write about it and inspire people to kind of teach and get the best out of these children? How do you do it?
I don't know. I suppose it's interesting. That's a pretty tough question, I suppose, for me to answer, because it's. I suppose we all have the same 24 hours in the day, and it's kind of what you do with those hours that kind of that makes it count. And I think for me, I get asked quite a lot of times how do I have the time to maybe fit my writing, and that's something maybe I can kind of answer a little bit easier, because it's quite kind of quantifiable. And what I say to that is that I never thought, when I was at school, I was a typical C grade, middle of the road, kind of, bottom of kind of top-ish kind of pathway sets. I was kind of, I got C's at GCSE. I got C in English. I would have never, ever would imagine that I'd have written a book and been an author if you'd told me that at that point there. Like, it would have just been the most ridiculous thing for anyone to ever have said. But I think that I'm a testament that with practice, you can get better at whatever you want to, as long as you have the desire to want to be better at it. And I think from blogging and continually kind of writing about my thoughts, and always thinking about, well, what's my audience, and what's the purpose of me writing this? And my purpose is normally twofold. First and foremost, to share my expertise, my knowledge, my motivation, inspiration, whatever you want to call it, with other people, because I also find that I get that from others. So rather than just taking from those professional networks, it's about giving back as well. You know, actually, if we only ever take things from a pot, then it's not going to, the pot's not going to be as plentiful or as diverse as it is if we all we all kind of contribute to it. And I think that someone once said to me that, so I saw a quote somewhere saying that what's normal to you may be remarkable to somebody else. So actually, just because you think, well, this is just what I do in my classroom, to other people that might be amazing. It might really help them. So I think it's about doing that. And secondly, the other thing that it gives me writing is that it allows me to reflect on why I've done something, how I've done it, and how it's been successful. Because if I have to do that, and write and talk to someone about why I've done it, then I need to think about those steps. So it lets me be, I suppose, what we all say we should have been when we first came into teaching. They talk about being reflective practitioners, and writing, it lets me do that. And I feel it's quite kind of therapeutic at some point to do that. So I quite enjoy it. I enjoy it for that reason. So writing books doesn't feel like an extra job or a chore to me. I like doing it, and as we all know, if you like doing something, then it becomes far easier for you to do it, and it doesn't feel like a chore. So just like someone going to the gym, playing football, going for a walk, taking the dog out, if it's something you enjoy doing, then you don't feel it's something that you don't want to do. So that's kind of how it works, really.
Fantastic. I mean, talk me through your blogging journey. How did you at what point did you think, you know what, I'm going to start blogging? And what was your motivation behind it? Was it to gain a following? Was it to gain more interaction with other teachers to find out what you were doing was correct? Was it almost to justify the way that you were practicing was the right way to do it? What was your motivation behind it?
I think I'd seen quite a few people starting to kind of blog, and I think I've always been interested in digital technology. And I just came to a realization really that the internet was allowing people to create free blogs, put their ideas out there, and you didn't have to be a professor of a university, to actually then have your ideas feel like they are authentic and worthwhile listening to. And I just felt there was a movement, I'd say about maybe 15 years ago, of tweeting, blogging, and having free platforms where people could actually express their ideas. And I really felt I wanted to get on board with that kind of movement of what I feel is now really current and authentic professional development coming from people that are still doing it. Found the easy way to do it. Got myself a free blog, got on with it, started writing. And I remember the first time I'd kind of put an idea out there. There was a teacher in America that had kind of got back to me and said, "Oh, I've used it in my classroom today, and it was amazing." And I was absolutely kind of gobsmacked and over the moon that I'd written something from my kind of bedroom on my laptop, and I just literally sent it up to the ether, and a teacher in America had read it and used it, and it had made a difference to her kids in her classroom, like 3,500 miles away. And it kind of sideswiped me a little bit that it was just like, whoa, like that is cool. And I suppose I got the bug from there in terms of, right, who else can I help and what else can I kind of put down that, and then also at the same time, like I said before, finding ideas from other people and taking ideas from other people. So it was very much a two-way kind of street. And like anything, the more people that retweet it or like it or comment on it and that kind of stuff, the more you have motivation to keep doing it. I've just felt that it's been a great platform, and I think that's what the internet has been an amazing opportunity for people to do that. And likewise, there's some kind of dangers with it as well, that we need to make sure that just because someone's written it down and it's published on the internet doesn't mean to say it's true, doesn't mean to say it works. And you've got to take those things with context and have enough about yourself to read it and make your own minds up. Just because Jon Tait says something doesn't mean to say it's right, it's true, or anything. But again, it's giving people time to reflect and think about things and then decide whether they want to put it into practice themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so you've obviously were blogging for a few years. Wrote your first book, was it in 2011 or 2012?
No, it was about 2017. I've done 4 in a fairly short period of time.
It was quite early. You're right, because I couldn't see the first book. I mean, so obviously you've written 4 books.
Yeah.
What are the results been? Have you had a lot of people looking at the book, coming back to you and saying, "Look, it was a great book"? I mean, what's the general consensus been from teachers?
Yeah, it's been great, and going back to right at the start, my blogging helped me get my first kind of first book kind of going, and Bloomsbury, my publishers who are amazing, they kind of wrote to me and emailed me and said, "We've seen what you've been writing, on your blog. Would you like to kind of write for us?" So it was because I had that back catalogue of articles over a period of 4 or 5 years that they kind of got in touch with me to write that first one. And yeah, I mean, I've written now, the first one was 100 Ideas on Engaging Learners. The second one was a book on senior leadership for the CPD, the Bloomsbury CPD Library. Then it was Succeeding as a Head of Year, and now Teaching Rebooted. So all of them they've got a different market. You've got kind of classroom pedagogy, middle leadership, senior leadership, and now educational research. And I often get people messaging me, tweeting me, emailing me from wherever they are, in the world, saying, "I've bought your book, really enjoyed it, it's great. I'm going to use it as a whole school CPD kind of, to help CPD in the school, or it's helped my practice." My head of year one, actually, that was my third one, had quite a few people, because the target audience really is somebody, I suppose, wanting to get into be a head of year and then kind of succeeding as it. Excuse me. And I've had quite a few people leave messages on Amazon and that kind of stuff saying that they were going for a head of year job, they were going to interview, they bought the book, and they were successful interviewing, they got the job, and they were, so that's just really nice. It's just a really nice kind of warm feeling where you think, I've really helped someone, and that's what it's about for me. It's about exactly the same reasons why I went into teaching in the first place, was to pass on some knowledge, skills, expertise, characteristics, whatever they are, to help other people. And I'm now doing that in my writing as well, which is, it's great. It's a nice feeling. And when I get those little reviews or emails, people saying how they've liked it, or, I got one the other day from someone who lives out in Dubai, who was sat by the pool, tweeting me a picture, like 40 degrees, drink in his hand, my book on the kind of on the sun lounger next to the pool. So they sometimes also annoy me at the same time, because I was pretty jealous of that one. But it's great to see that it's that it's been read all over the place.
So there's obviously a lot of ways that you can progress as a teacher in your career, right? You can go down the curriculum development route, or sort of the way that you said, like pastoral, going down the head of house, head of year, or even sort of more like teaching and learning. Just for everyone, like what made it? Why did you kind of go down that route, down pastoral? Like what made you connect with those kids in that way to kind of push you in that sort of progression route?
It was interesting because I had absolutely no desires to do that at all, and I came into PE teaching to be a PE teacher. Simple, like that. That was what it was. I had no desires to be a head teacher. I know some people tell me they do, and I've always wanted to be a head teacher. And I've never had those desires. When I started teaching, I literally just looked at what was the here and now in front of me, and that was ultimately because I'd said before I coached football. I wanted to basically do a kind of coaching style role, but obviously with coaching and things, the security isn't there. You have to work weekends, evenings, all that kind of stuff because the kids are at school. So that's why I went into teaching. And remember about 2 or 3 years into my career, one of the assistant head teachers spoke to me and said, "Have you seen the job for the assistant head of year? It's up on the staff room wall." And I said, no, I haven't. And she said, "Well, I think you'd be really good at it. I think you need to think about it." And I distinctly remember saying to her in the office, "Why would I want to pick up everyone else's crap all day long?" And that's all I then did for the next 10 years of my career, was I just resolved issues that other people came to me, because that's what you kind of do in the pastoral sense. It's not about necessarily looking after your own classroom and doing everything else. It's looking after other problems that people pass to you. So I did that, and I really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed that sense of being able to, I suppose, parent a year group as well. And I think that I've got 2 children of my own. I certainly feel that being a parent and being a father made me a better teacher, or made me a better pastoral leader, because I certainly had more empathy and understanding. It just made me see the world through a different lens, I suppose, being a parent, and that certainly helped me when I was kind of speaking to parents, because I was always able to say, I'm a parent as well, and I understand this, and I truly feel that that it really helped me. What I would say as well is that I feel that people have different kind of opinions on this, but my opinion, and it might be slightly biased because this is the way I've gone in my career, but I really feel that going down a pastoral route of kind of head of year and any kind of pastoral routes that you see in schools gives you a far better understanding of the wider picture of the bigger picture of school, because you are dealing with whole school issues with behaviour, attendance, safeguarding, child protection, exclusions, dealing with parents, etc., etc. Sometimes, and I'm not throwing a blanket over everyone here, but sometimes I feel that when you go down a subject route, you quite rightly look after your own subject and you are concentrating on maths or English or PE, and I don't feel you sometimes see as much of the bigger picture as you do from a head of year position. And I think it gave me a really good understanding of how the whole school operated, and working across everything across the school's head of year rather than just in a subject route. So that it worked for me. Might not work for everybody, but I certainly felt that it was a great opportunity. So for anybody listening who has the opportunity to go into a pastoral side, I feel personally that it gives you lots more experience of whole school issues than maybe a subject route does. And there are times where people become a great classroom teacher, want to do something different, and you see a head of subject or a head of faculty sat above you, who you know isn't going to be moving on for the next 5 or 10 years, and sometimes your career might feel kind of blocked at that point. So yeah, explore what pastoral opportunities your school has, because it's been certainly an amazing opportunity and route through to senior leadership for me. Even though at that point I didn't know I wanted that, but at every stage it's opened up more doors for me to progress into my career, and give me great opportunities.
Fantastic. Obviously, the last 7 months have been really difficult, obviously with COVID. And I think one of the biggest reasons I wanted to do this podcast is to create awareness about how hard teachers have been working over this period, because I believe, like, some people have this misconception that for the last 7 months teachers have been on holiday, right? And which is obviously not the case, is it? I mean, it's quite an absurd thing to say, actually, because of the hard work you have been doing. And I think ultimately this podcast is to create that awareness. Like, just talk us through the last 7 months. How hard has it been for you?
It's been a very different experience, I would say, and I think I would use different quite carefully there. That it's, the first kind of few months where we were in lockdown, and schools were closed. That was very interesting, because we were at a stage where, and I think if I'd had my time again, and I've spoken about this a few times now, I remember sitting in my office at my old school now when I was deputy head, and I've got a big kind of TV on my wall that I use for kind of team meetings. And I remember sitting with my team, my assistant head teachers, sitting around and watching live Sky News, and just our kind of, although we knew it was going to happen, hearing the words that schools were going to close, even just for 2 weeks at that point, was just kind of like, whoa! Like it was a real, a monumental kind of moment where you just think, I never really thought this would actually kind of happen, And even though Ireland had gone the day before, or or a few hours before, we kind of knew it was in the offing. And then we had those 2 weeks before Easter, and we tried to do as much as we could in terms of teaching resources online and that kind of stuff. But if I had my time again, I would have done nothing other in those 2 weeks than train staff and train kids on how to use the technology, because we assume, and I've spoken about this in many different kind of talks about we are teaching the digital natives, and I use that term quite often. However, the digital natives that we are teaching have lots of digital skills, but some of them are the exact opposite of the skills that we want. For instance, they know how to build towns and cities and villages on Minecraft, and multiplayer, and do kind of live kind of chatting on Xbox Live, and all these amazing things that they can do. Ask them to open an email, or to actually to put things in their calendar, and they're just kind of lost, because they're a generation that have been messaging through lots of different apps and messaging kind of apps, and they know how to communicate well. But in terms of formal communication through emails and accessing emails and doing all the kind of the essential kind of functions that we've needed over the last few months, they find it very difficult. So, and I think also we never really knew as a profession how long we were going to be in that lockdown for. If we'd have known 2 weeks before Easter that we were in that for the long haul until the summer, I think lots of schools would have done different things, and we'd have actually set our stall out for the long haul. However, we always knew that it was a 2 or 3 week review process, so we never really knew so we were always doing things for a 2 week kind of or 3 week kind of situation. And that made it very, very difficult. So that was difficult to start with, and all our meetings were online, and we were at home trying to do that. And I know my kids are kind of 16 and 12, so they're all right on their own. But I know that some teachers, if you've got a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, in your house, then it's all well and good saying, well, you're okay working from home, but actually, has everyone kind of got the facilities to work from home? So that was difficult for a few people. And then since we've been back from September, it's been enormously difficult for the logistics of the school to run. And I don't know how much people outside of education actually appreciate the things that have had to change in schools. So, for instance, all teachers now are probably not teaching in their own classroom anymore, because they're having to go to where the students are in their pods or their zones, depending how your kind of schools are set out. So straight away, that makes a huge difference, because you haven't got the resources at hand that you would normally have. You're having to carry things around with you all the time. And the first thing we always say in teaching to trainee teachers is make sure you are there and prepared before the kids arrive, make sure you're at the door. Well, now we're in a situation where the kids are sat there before you're getting there, and you are entering their space. And it just the psychology of, rather than them coming into your space and you owning that space and saying, this is my rules in my house, this is how you operate in my classroom, you're then walking into their space that they've probably been in for 2 or 3 hours, and they're sat in the same places. And that mentality is very, very different.
How much of an effect does that have on your ability to teach them?
I think it has a huge effect if you don't know anything about it. If you just roll up and think everything's going to be the same, then I think it has a huge effect. And I think it's about how you make those little tweaks and those little changes, so that if the class have been there before you and you walk in and you haven't got anything prepared as an immediate starter or bell task, and then you've got to log into the computer, and then you've got to fire Sims up for the register, and then you've got to get your PowerPoint up or whatever, suddenly the kids are just sat there and they're in complete control. So you need to get there and have those things at your disposal ready to go and ready to kind of start without having to kind of get the computer kind of set up. And I think that, once you start to do those things, it makes it a bit easier. So it is a lot more difficult. And again, those are the things that, unless you've been in teaching for a while, you don't necessarily think are as much of an issue, but actually they are huge in the dynamics. And especially if you don't get the first few minutes right in your lesson, then straight away you're on the back foot. So those things are really important. And then also the amount of lunch times. Most schools have got like different lunch times for every different group of students, because we've got to keep those students in different pods and not cross-contaminate. So you've now got lunch times starting from in some schools like 11:30 in the morning until about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's almost like an all-day breakfast. You've got this kind of canteen that's operating for about 2.5 hours, and they've got to clean in between. So that's got to be supervised by duty staff. So in lots of schools, that's supervised by the senior leadership team, which means that for a lot of senior leaders, their core purpose right now is the management and logistics of moving students around the building. And they're on duty for about 2 or 3 hours a day. So it makes it very, very difficult to do anything strategic in your school other than just make sure that the safety of the kids is paramount. So those things are increasingly difficult for leadership teams and leaders to do. I mean, there have been some positives in this. There's lots of schools, and certainly the schools that I'm kind of deputy CEO for, are saying there are some things that we would have never, ever, ever dreamt of doing before lockdown. We've never have had 5 lunch times. We've never have had split breaks. We'd have never have kept the kids separate. And now they're saying, well, you know what? Some of that's been really interesting, because it has allowed students to play a bit more, or for things to different year groups to interact differently. Rather than year 7s out with year 11s at the same time. And there's so many things that have come out that have been positive, unexpected findings. Even though they're difficult, and the challenge is, can we sustain it though? Yes, it might be all well and good now, but can you sustain the fact that your senior leaders are having 3 hours of duty a day? Because actually our focus isn't as much on just order of the school and teaching and learning and quality classrooms. It's more on movement of students, logistics and stuff like that. So we are running our schools. Whether we are improving them as much as we wanted to do prior to lockdown is, I suppose, is up for question.
So how difficult is it going to be with everything that's going on with the social distancing and having to move the kids around, and how difficult is it to meet the curriculum needs, and how difficult is it going to be for these kids to sit their exams next year?
Curriculum needs are difficult. We're changing things, little by little to kind of make it more adaptable. From an exam's point of view, I'm not so sure how it's going to work. I'll be absolutely honest, because you've got a situation where national exams are norm referenced. And what that means is that for people who are not kind of familiar with that term, it means that the scores for everyone are kind of collated at the end of an exam nationally, and the exam board will only give out 5% of grade 9s, 10% of grade 7s, etc., and they'll give out a certain proportion each year. So it's not like in old money where if you got 65%, you were going to get a C no matter what. Well, actually, depending on the year group that goes through and how intelligent or they are, different percentages will, depending on where you are there. So 65% one year might be a grade 6, 65% the year after might be a grade 7 or might be a grade 8, depending on where those, where however many people in the cohort. What that means is that you are competing not against yourself, and this is the really important part. You're not competing against yourself here to aim to get a certain percentage, which means you get a certain grade. You are competing against everyone else in the country to see where you fall in the rank order in the whole country. And the reason why I'm saying this is that how on earth can we be in a position where some students have had a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks more off school at home because of lockdown, and they are going to compete against students who have had no time off at school during lockdown? That is not fair. And I know the government will say, well, we're still supposed to be giving home learning at home. Yes, we are, but it's not the same. If it was as good, then we wouldn't open schools. We wouldn't need to spend millions and millions of pounds on heating and lighting. We would just do it from home. If it was as good, then why do we wouldn't? It's a replacement, and it is good, but it's not as good, and we all know that. So I'm not sure how on earth. I mean, I know from my my daughter's school, she's in year 8 at the moment. They sent a letter home last week saying that all of year 11 were going to be going out for 2 weeks, the whole of year 11. Now they've timed that with half term now that we're in, but they're still missing a week of school. So that's the whole of year 11. Now that's October. What about when we get to November, December, January? Some students might have missed 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of school, and other ones haven't. I'm not sure how right and proper it is to then judge students nationally against each other in rank orders when there has been a massive disparity, or potentially a massive disparity in the schooling that those students have had. And I think that my concern, and I hope I'm not wrong here, my concern is that we're going to get to a stage where a last minute decision will be made again. And I wish we just made the decision now and just say, right, okay, we're going to, we're not going to do exams. Here's how we're going to do it. Here's how your mock exams need to be run, etc. But my fear is that we're going to get to March, April time, and someone's going to, we're having to cancel exams again, and we're going to be in a last minute position once again. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
I mean, what would be the answer to this? Like, what would you prefer them to maybe set it so it's based how it used to be? Like, 65% is a C for everybody. Like, is that the fairest way to do it?
I suppose it depends who you speak to. I mean, for me, it seems fair that way, that actually there's a certain standard, and if you meet that standard, then you get that kind of qualification. But I know when you speak to statisticians, mathematicians, and they talk about kind of wanting to make sure that the exams are year by year controlling a similar kind of trend and kind of flight path in terms of kind of grades. But I just don't. I'm just not a big fan of that, to be fair. I think that you might have then therefore 2 people that go for a job, and they both get one has a grade 7 in maths, one has a grade 6 in maths. Okay, and the grade 7 in maths has come from a weaker year group than the student in the grade 6 in maths because they're from different year groups. So the kid who got the year 6 in maths might actually be more intelligent in maths than the student who got the grade 7 because they're in different year groups. And unluckily, his year group was a far higher kind of high performing year group. So it doesn't necessarily then demonstrate which student has a higher ability in mathematics and numeracy. And that's where I think that the system is a little bit flawed. But politicians, statisticians, they want to see that there's a general kind of rough, I suppose, kind of flatlining of kind of percentage of grades given out each year, to keep that kind of what they say is fair and average. But I'm not sure when it comes back down to the individual student, I'm not really sure how that kind of works.
I mean, I always find it quite mind-blogging when politicians and people like Jonathan Galvin, Gavin Williamson, that sort of has come out and tells teachers how to teach, and he's never been in the classroom. You know, I mean, he was a Secretary of Defence before or something, wasn't he? So it's always a bit confusing as to why he's telling you how to teach. I mean, how frustrating is that as a teacher to kind of get advice from somebody that's not taught and be told what to do?
Yeah, and it's not just me. I'm probably speaking for everyone in the teaching profession. It's extremely frustrating, but I think it would be extremely frustrating for anybody in any profession. You know, that if a politician came out and told somebody how to do brain surgery better, or how to police, or make an arrest better, or put out a fire. You know, like, actually, we need to make sure that education isn't a political football, and unfortunately it is, and it has been for too long. Yeah, but it's something that I suppose will probably never be taken out of the political arena, because it swings votes, either way, because everyone's been to school once, so we all feel like we understand it and we know it, and it pulls on our heartstrings if we've got our own kids and our own children. But yeah, it is frustrating, and unfortunately, we live on sometimes a 3 or 4 year cycle of a new government coming in, a new education secretary, new ideas, new policies, new Ofsted framework. And the amount of work that schools do to react to new change in education policy is phenomenal. It shouldn't be like that, but it is. That's the kind of education landscape we live in.
It's crazy, isn't it? My sister, she's a head teacher in a school in Havering, and she follows you, by the way. Like, she's read your book and stuff, so she was quite looking forward to seeing the podcast too, actually. But she sort of explained to me that, like, you obviously hear the news, and that's when you find out that schools are shutting down, or there's going to be an update in the system, and you've got parents who, like, sort of wanting to know what's going on, and it's like, well, I just found out, like, I mean, just give it at least a day or two to work on it, and it must be so difficult to work under that kind of pressure with everything that's going on, dealing with parents, dealing with the worries about maybe catching COVID yourself, and you're on the front line, aren't you? Risking your life, like, effectively. I mean, the sacrifices that you have to make. I mean, my sister doesn't come to her parents' house because she doesn't want to pass anything on, and that's because she goes around with so many kids. It's so difficult. I mean, what could be done? Like, whether it be from the government or from schools or anybody, like, what could have been done better, and what can we do better going forward?
I think it's interesting because the point you make there about kind of teachers finding out at the same time as the general public do, and that is tough, and it is hard, and it's frustrating. But I suppose if I thought about it logically, well, do we really think that if they'd told the teaching profession 2 days early that it wouldn't be leaked out? Like, it's kind of, it's one of those, and that's not saying people are unprofessional, but the amount of people that would therefore know, the amount of teachers in the country, you just know that it would get out, I suppose. So it's very difficult from that point of view. In terms of what could be done differently, I just think that just more understanding of the profession, really, and whether that's, I mean, in an ideal world, it should be taken out of the political arena, in my opinion, and run by teachers, ex-teachers, ex-head teachers, real kind of strong professional groups, that kind of can really move teaching forward and education forward, guided by science and not just guided by politics. Whether that'll happen, I'm not sure that'll happen in my lifetime. I think we've been trying for that for a long time, but I definitely feel it needs to be more understood. And there's lots of things that annoy teachers and head teachers at the moment in terms of government guidance coming out on Fridays of a half term or in the middle of half term, and this idea that workload, we're supposed to be looking after people's workload in the profession, yet things get released at 10 o'clock on a Friday night before a half term, and actually, in fact, one of them was about workload and well-being, and that was released at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. You think you can time these things, whenever you want to. You know, I run lots of social media channels for myself, but also for our schools. And I know we use scheduling tools to put social media posts out at specific times that we want to. We don't put things out at 9 o'clock in the morning or 9 o'clock. You know, we put things out mid-morning, 11, 12 o'clock. We put things out at between 6 and 8 o'clock in an evening for specific reasons, because that's when people are normally consuming lots of content on social media, and those are the right times. To put something out about well-being and the well-being of an education profession at 10 o'clock on a Friday night, you know, it's just it beggars belief, because you can time these things whenever you want to. You know, it's not just a case of, oh, well, we had no control of when that went out. We have control over everything we do, you know, and we can put things out when we want to. So I think there needs to be more understanding of the, and certainly in more recent times, and I get why this has had to happen, but the amount of updates from the DfE, and you look on Twitter, and head teachers are just kind of, there was a time when there was a new update coming out every couple of days, and the updates were, you know, 30, 40 pages long. You know, they were big documents that you had to read inside out and understand what they were. And yeah, very, very difficult for the people on the ground. Do I know what the answer is to make it better? I don't, because, you know, I suppose these updates, the DfE said, well, they needed to come out, but I just feel that there needs to be more empathy for the people on the ground that are running schools in difficult circumstances, having to quickly, on the fly, read documents, digest them, and put things into practice at very, very short notice. Yeah, it's just been difficult for everyone all around, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it must be that much more difficult being part of the senior leadership team, because, Jon, it's obviously clear that you're very passionate about being in the classroom, and you said yourself that you spend 3 hours a day outside the classroom, probably just on lunch duties and breaks, and then you're sort of spending a lot of your valuable time outside of where you are sort of most beneficial for these kids. Like, is there anything that schools can do to overcome this? I mean, is it just because, like, some people say, well, why don't you just hire somebody to do it? You know, why don't you just hire somebody to be there? Why can you not do that?
2 reasons, I suppose. Firstly, it's cost. You know, and with kind of tightening budgets, then you've got to work what you've got. You know, and if you brought a team of people in, firstly, would you get people to come in for 3 hours a day? You know, I mean, who want, you know, who's going to be, I suppose, that effective that kids look up to them, they respect them, and they only want to work 3 hours a day. You know, and so I think it's about building relationships with kids. And I always know from being ahead of year, I always used to say that once you have been ahead of year, or you've been a teacher with students when they first came into the school in year 7, in my case, in secondary school, then when they get to year 9, 10, 11, and they might have some issues, they're a lot easier to deal with because you've had them and you've built a relationship with them since they've been, you know, in year 7. If you just kind of, you know, open this kind of, you know, system where you've got a team of kind of, you know, policemen or bodyguards or kind of, you know, bouncers once in the corridors that the kids don't have any respect for, they haven't sat and read to them and built those relationships with them, or taken them out on the sports field, or taken them away on a trip, then they just become, you know, another kind of law enforcement that people don't really like and don't really respect. And so I think it's very difficult to do that. So I think it has to be that, unfortunately, and it's the people that, you know, the most senior in the school that can, you know, put sanctions in place if need be, can motivate kids, can help staff, and it's one of those things that, unfortunately, it is what it is, you know.
Absolutely. I mean, how difficult is it working with parents at the moment?
It's a lot more difficult than it ever was, because the normal meeting where you would have and bring parents into a small room with you, and, you know, suddenly it's kind of, oh, well, how do we make sure we're 2 meters apart and with this, and you know, so it is more difficult, and I think a lot more of those meetings are probably being conducted via telephone call rather than face to face, yeah, it's just another logistical challenge of the role that certainly a head of year has, in terms of, you know, speaking to parents and meeting with parents, and you know, and they may be conscious about coming into school as well and not wanting to come into that area, you know. So yeah, it is certainly more difficult.
And how difficult is it for you? Obviously, I'm sure you've got teacher trainees or people that are doing the PGCE or even NQTs. I mean, how difficult is it for them to kind of rewire their teaching styles compared to different years? Obviously, different years, you're animated, you're sort of like a presence in the classroom, you're walking around. I mean, this year, you're kind of like within a 2 meter space, aren't you, at the moment? And you can't really, it's not really much movement. I mean, how difficult is it for the new teachers in the industry?
It is massively different and massively different. And I was speaking to an NQT just at the start of the year actually, and she was kind of saying she was doing this, and I said, listen, in 10 years' time, when you're mentoring trainee teachers or you're a senior leader, and an NQT comes up to you and says, "Oh, it's really difficult," I said, you'll be able to say, "You've had nothing compared to what I had in my NQT year." I said, because this is so different. I mean, if we take it back to their training year. Again, people need to remember that trainee teachers last year, who are now NQTs this year, only had about half a year of training, okay? Because a trainee teacher normally, and I can speak from experience here because when I was director of teaching school, I oversaw the school direct program. They come into school in September, they are observing quite a lot of lessons. They don't really start teaching lessons until October. They take, 6-7 lessons a week. They get to Christmas, they go to a different school and get a different experience. Then they come back to your school at Easter, and that last term, they're teaching the most lessons that they would do until the summer. That didn't happen for them. We went in lockdown 2 weeks before Easter. So they didn't really get they didn't get their third term at all. They only got, they got cut short their second term anyway. Then they were passed. And then they're now at NQT. And now they're told that you can't wander around the classroom. You've got to stay in potentially like a box. And I put this on LinkedIn at the start of the year. It feels like, if anyone watches football, it feels like a technical area on the sideline of a football manager, where you're in that kind of box, in that zone where you can't move out of. So how do you check on progress? How do you check students are doing things? How do you go and have a quiet word with someone? All these things. And as a profession, we've got the answers for them now, and we're doing some great things. But as an NQT, wow, that is tough, because not only have you had your training year cut short, and your biggest term for when you were going to actually try out your techniques and teach them didn't happen, suddenly all the things you were told, now you can't do, and you've got to do different things. And it's just like, wow. So our NQTs, and I say the trust and also the nation's NQTs, have done an incredible job to have to think on their feet, to adapt, to be dynamic. What I will say, though, is that this will, although they might not think it right now, this will massively stand them in good stead for their careers. Because as teachers, we all know you have to be able to change your strategy, to change your techniques, to adapt mid-lesson, to do something different lesson 1 than you would do lesson 5 because kids have come from PE, or it's just after lunchtime, or it's windy, or it's really hot, or there's a fly or a bee in the room, or whatever it is that you have to change because of the circumstances. As an experienced teacher, you can do that. And NQTs are having to learn about that on their feet right now. So yeah, very, very difficult, but it will probably make them stronger and better teachers down the line as a result of it.
Absolutely. With the ones that are studying at the moment, I mean, what could you say to them to help them get through this year?
I think that I always say to trainees and to new teachers that it's not the load that breaks you, it's the way you carry it. And what I mean by that is that it's not, teaching is not so hard and so difficult in your first training year or your NQT year that everyone fails and everyone drops out. We're all teachers that are still in teaching are a testament to that. So it's not too difficult that it becomes impossible. It becomes impossible, though, if you're not organized. And going back to my kind of quote there, that it's not the load that breaks you. So it's not that it's immensely difficult and it breaks you. It's the way you carry that. So if you aren't organized, and if you suddenly remember at 10 o'clock at night that you've got 40 books to mark before Monday morning to give them back to the kids, then it is going to break you. Let's be honest. If you forget to tell your wife, your kids, your partner, whatever, that a parents' evening is on tonight, and you tell them at or you text from school saying, "Oh, sorry, I forgot to tell you, I'm here till 8 o'clock tonight." Those things will break your marriage. It's those things that you need to be looking at the calendar. You need to be scheduling your time. You need to be, blocking out when you're going to do things and be hyper organized to make sure that you therefore do that kind of little and often rather than massive chunks of work, because nobody wants teachers coming into school who are so tired and drained of energy that they can't give the best to their kids. We need to give 100% to our students. Our students deserve 100% of us, not 100% of what's left in the tank. And that's a very different 100%, you know, and we need to treat our bodies like athletes treat their bodies. And I don't mean to an extent where, you know, we've got strict training regimes. But what I mean by that is you wouldn't have any professional athlete train and train and train and train without rest. Because as we both know, that's when injuries come in, and overuse injuries and fatigue. And either mistakes are made because it's fatigue, or there's injuries because of muscle fatigue. So we need to make sure as teachers, we give ourselves that rest, and we have those down times, those hobbies, those things away from, you know, and you know, I always talk about as well, don't let date night become data night. You know, make sure you still have those date nights, you know, and you're not suddenly just working all the time thinking that you're a martyr of the profession. Your kids need the best of you. So you need to make sure that you are in the best mental and physical shape for them. And if that means down in tools every now and again to make sure you are, then that's what you need to do. And we shouldn't feel guilty about that.
Absolutely. I think it's always it's much easier to say that. I know it's much harder to do, isn't it? I think when you're so like involved with these kids and you want to make a difference, especially as an NQT at the beginning of your year. When I speak to NQTs, and I've been doing this for 6 years, and over the years you speak to these NQTs that are so enthusiastic and they want to literally like go above and beyond to try to make a career in teaching, you know. And in those first 4 years they work really hard, but you're right, they do get burnt out, and by the 4th year, the statistics show that teachers tend to leave the industry, don't they? And it's more than ever, it's so important to get that work-life balance, so we aren't losing these teachers, we're retaining teachers within the industry, and it's more important than ever, you know. I mean, it's especially more important now with everything going on. It's such a difficult year, and like from your experience and what you think is going to happen with the future of education, how crucial is it more people get into teaching?
I think it's really crucial because it's about getting the right people in as well, and we need to make sure that we're right on that. It's not just, you know, that there had been talk a few years ago of following things like the kind of Finland route, where you get kind of more higher class degrees and firsts into teaching. I don't support that because again, going back to my story about being a C grade kind of student, I have seen through my own eyes from being director of teaching school that being more intelligent does not make you necessarily a better teacher. And sometimes the inverse is true. So sometimes the most intelligent people and the most academic people don't make great teachers. They make great academics, but they don't make great teachers. And I think that there's certain characteristics in terms of how you build relationships, how you get on with students, how you have empathy for some of the things that students are going through. And you know, I firmly believe it's about getting the right people into teaching. How we do that, there's been lots of different ways that the government have tried, throwing money at different kind of schemes, marketing, advertising, teach first, school direct, you know, all different kind of routes into teaching. And I don't know, I'm not sure. I'm a big advocate of it because I've loved it. And it was interesting. Some people who listen to you might use an app called Teacher Tap, and Teacher Tap is an app on that kind of where you there's 3 questions a day that you know, and there's about 8,000 or 9,000 teachers on it at the moment, where you know it talks about different things and it shows you results at the end of the week. It helps inform government policy and various bits and bobs. And one of the questions of the day was, knowing everything you know right now, would you still have come into the profession as a teacher? You know, and my answer was absolutely yes. You know, yes, it's been tough at certain points, but I've absolutely loved it. It's given me great opportunities, great life experiences, and I wouldn't swap it for the world. How we can get that message to potential trainee teachers to really let them believe that. I think the other issue is pay as well. You know, that actually there's lots of graduates that, you know, in certain subjects, computer science, chemistry, physics, those type of things, that can probably get higher paid graduate jobs when they leave university than they can if they're going to come into teaching. So, you know, you talk to a 21-year-old about, you know, do you want to come into teaching, and it's going to be really, really, really hard work for the first 2 or 3 years, and you're going to get a lot less pay than you would if you were going to go into this graduate job. For a lot of people, then that's not going to sell it to them. You know, there needs to be that real intrinsic desire inside them to want to be a teacher. And if they haven't got that inside them, then money and workload will sway their opinion, you know, and sway their way they go. So very difficult. But yeah, we need to make sure we get the right people into the profession, rather than just more intelligent,
Absolutely. It's difficult though, isn't it? Because when you're at school, you don't necessarily think, I'm going to go get a degree and then get a PGCE straight after and go into education. And it's hard, isn't it? Because you're right. If you're a maths graduate, you can go get a lot more money doing something like become a financial analyst or stockbroking, or, like you can go out and make more money. I mean, it has to be you wanting to be a teacher, or you find it rewarding to work with kids. I mean, just for anybody that's a graduate watching this, it's not enough for you to want to become a teacher just because you feel it's a safe job at the moment with everything going on, right? I mean, anyone that's sort of watching this that is thinking, oh, should I just become a teacher because it's safe at the moment, and like with everything that's happened with COVID, we don't have any job security in other sectors. That is absolutely not the wrong. It's absolutely the wrong mentality. You probably end up leaving teaching within the first 2 years, won't you? And like what Jon said, is so important to get the right people that want to come into teaching and make a difference in these kids' lives. And that passion for being able to do that is probably one of the key elements of becoming a good teacher, isn't it, Jon? Like, from your experience, would you say that is one of the big elements of becoming a good teacher, or are there any others that are really, really important?
Yeah, it's about having patience as well. There's lots of people who say to me, "I couldn't do your job. I haven't got the patience that you have." And it's about, again, wanting to help people. In whatever. Now, it's interesting. My career has changed hugely over the last few years. That I don't really teach anymore now. That I as in the role I do, but I still feel I teach. And what I mean by that is my students are now the teachers. So I'm teaching the teachers, and I'm teaching leaders. So actually, I am still doing exactly the same things I did when I came into teaching, which is pass on my experience, help people, trying to make them to be the best people that they can be, whether it was an 11-year-old, a 16-year-old, or now a 43-year-old. It doesn't make any difference. I'm still fulfilling that role that I came into teaching to do. I just do it with a different kind of age and clientele. So it's about wanting to help, wanting to do things, people wanting and to feel that buzz, of actually when somebody does, like I said about that first blog post that I put out, when somebody gets back to you and says, "Oh, I've used this and it worked." Again, when you're first teaching and you help somebody and you see them get something right because you've helped them, and that smile on your face and that kind of warm feeling inside you never goes away, whether that's when you're working with a student or whether you're working with a teacher or a leader or a head teacher, in my case. So that's got to be inside you. And you'll probably know whether you've got that inside you or not. And again, it's not about the holidays. It's not about the kind of work-life balance, that kind of stuff. It's about, do I enjoy working with people? And it's a great environment to do it in. And I've loved it.
Fantastic. I mean, it's amazing, isn't it? Because I've it's weird, because I've spoken to a couple of teachers that have said they've just fallen into it. I mean, they volunteered in the school and absolutely loved it. And the thing is, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I think the education profession, the teaching profession, is always under scrutiny. It's underappreciated for the level of work you do, and unfortunately, in monetary terms, it doesn't always reflect the level of work you do, because a lot of people are under this misconception that you have 13 weeks off in a year, which is not the case, is it? It's more like you get a few weeks off, if that, and I'm sure over this last 7 months, you've hardly had any time off, because you've always had to be preparing for the new sort of legislation that's been put in place, and you're always having to keep on top of it. I mean, it's not a pretty job. It's not the best paid job. But what makes it worthwhile? Why should people get into teaching?
I think it's for me. It's that I think it's a great role to be to help individual people, like I've said before. But I think schools it's the foundation for every single role and post that anyone ever has. Where kids always go to school. And we are developing students and young people to be the next leaders. And I think that there is no better role for me in that than having a real helping hand and being strategic in my role now to enable us to be able to give students the best life chances possible. And I think that's really important. And for me, I think I'm immensely proud of that, to say that I'm a school leader, or when I say I'm a teacher, and to help shape individuals' lives. There's not many roles out there that you can say that. And come what may, whether it's raining, whether it's dark, whether it's sunny, whether it's windy, we're there every day. And we're there every day for those students. And those students, we are their safe place. We are their place where there's boundaries, where there's rules, where there's consistency. And students need that, and young people need that, and we're there to give them that. Whoever they are, wherever they're from, and we're really, I'm really proud of that we do that every day. Come what may.
Fantastic. And for those that are doing their PGCE at the moment and they're worried about finding a role for next September and qualifying, I mean, what do you think the recruitment side looks like for the next sort of 12 months? Like for these guys that are studying their teacher training at the moment, I mean, how worried should they be about finding a job for next year?
I don't think they should be worried, because I mean, every year there are people retiring, moving on, leaving the profession. That's not going to change. So there's always going to be the need for new recruits, new entrants in the profession. So those jobs will always exist, and that kind of stuff. Whether there'll be people moving on as much, staying in the profession to other schools, for promotions, I don't know. I suppose we might not know that for another 2 or 3 years in terms of how that looked when we look back on that. But ultimately, all I would say to trainees is, and I said this to a lot of people anyway, when they go for interviews, don't worry about anybody else. You just need to worry about being the best that you can be. And if you're the best that you can be, and you go to interview, and the school is right for you, and you're right for the school, you'll get the job. And not worrying about, there's going to be other people there. Forget that. Forget those. Have some tunnel vision. Be the best that you can be. Do everything that you can do. Control the controllables. Control how you act, how you are, how you teach, how great you are, how you answer questions, and everything will fall into place.
Fantastic. John, what do you look for? If you're interviewing an NQT for one of your schools, I mean, what's the thing that helps them stand out? What would you kind of be, what would you buy into and like think, I need them in my school and I want to offer them a role?
I look for that real kind of passion and authenticity in somebody in terms of why they really want to teach. But I'm also interested about them as a person, not just about how good they are as a maths teacher or a physics teacher, but actually, what do they do outside of school? What kind of floats their boat? What are they really passionate about and interested in? Because I want to see someone that is passionate about something and interested, because I coached American football for a long time outside of school and ended up coaching for kind of Great Britain. And that idea that you have something that drives your passion that you get into, because actually it then shows that you will get passionate into something else, and you'll get passionate in your teaching. And we want winners. We want people who have got drive and motivation to succeed and to be the best. Whether that's been the best at an American football teacher, whether that's been the best at arts and crafts, doesn't make any difference. It's about what else have you got in your life that shows me that you've got something about you. So yeah, that's interesting for me to know a bit more about the person as well, and what they're going to bring in terms of their characteristics to the role.
Fantastic. So just like if you had somebody that interviewed with you and like was a maths NQT, for example, or was doing the PGCE this year, for example, and they didn't necessarily have anything outside of maths. I mean, they were really passionate about maths. I mean, would that be a bit of a red flag for you if all they could really talk about was maths and not much outside of that?
No, I don't think it's a red flag. I just think it's a nice added extra if there is something there. But I certainly, this is not about just making something up and thinking, oh God, I need a hobby before I go off to my next maths. It's just, I suppose it's how can you show your passion in different ways, and again, it's the other way might be, you don't want somebody to say, oh, I coach American football 7 nights a week, because then I'm starting to think, well, hang on a second, is there any time left for maths teaching? So it's about getting the balance right, and it's about making sure that, that what we want to see, I suppose, more than anything else, is we want to see the real person. And I want to see somebody who I know that we're going to get on with and is going to fit into the team. Yes, they're going to be a great teacher, but they're not just a cardboard cutout. There's something about them that we can kind of key into and we can work with. Because again, students need to be able to kind of key into that and work with that on a relationship level. So it's about how can you demonstrate who you are as a real person.
Fantastic. Just in terms of I think we won't go on too much about this, but like graduates, I mean, I've spoken to a couple of graduates recently that sort of said that one was a biology specialist, one was a music specialist, one was geography, and they all said that they applied for teacher training for next year, and they got rejected. 2 out of the 3 applications still were waiting on application. I mean, well, I find that absolutely bizarre considering how much we are in need of teachers at the moment. Like, why is it that they would get rejected from these possible teacher training places in universities? And Are there other options for these graduates to gain the teacher training, i.e. directly with the school, or other possible options for them?
Yeah, and it's difficult because I don't know the individual's kind of circumstances there, and I suppose as a teaching training school, if you've got one space for a science teacher and somebody is better than you at interview, then sometimes it is what it is, But there are certainly lots of teacher training schools around the country that are looking for for teachers in all different subjects. So my advice would be to kind of keep looking. But sometimes when those posts are gone, they're gone, and certain subjects as well are more needed than others. So, for instance, you mentioned their biology. Biology, when I speak to scientists, is the most frequently the most frequent skill that science teachers have. The ones that we need the most are physics, because there's a lack of physicists coming into teaching. So therefore, training schools are looking more to try and get the golden nuggets of some great physics teachers, rather than people tell me biology teachers are 10 a penny. There are lots of them, and most science teachers in school will say that their strong point is biology. Whereas physics and chemistry are, certainly physics more so. So depending on the certain subject, it might be different. PE teaching is exactly the same. They're not training centres are told not really to take many PE teachers at the moment unless there's a real need for that role in that school afterwards, because if you're just taking loads more PE teachers on at the moment, you're just adding to that supply and demand issue, that's partly because things like PE and performing arts, drama, things like that, music, are getting cut a little bit from the offer that schools are making. Unfortunately, because of the push on EBAC and double weighting on maths and English, humanities, MFL, science, and curriculum designers are thinking, where can they get more time for maths or more time for English? And unfortunately, some of those non-examined kind of core subjects that you would like, that students might drop at the end of year 9, start to get kind of cut a little bit. So from maybe 2 lessons a week, it might go to 1 lesson a week, or from 4 a fortnight, it might go to 3. So schools are doing that to try and put more time into those areas that they're going to be really inspected on in terms of league tables and the importance on those I suppose tier 1 subjects. So therefore that affects recruitment down the line as well in some of those more kind of creative performing arts PE subjects.
Absolutely. Just to touch on the point, obviously, you mentioned if some subjects are naturally more demanding than others, like physics or math, like even chemistry, even female PE teachers in some respects are like gold dust, but yeah, but what I would say about that, obviously I've been doing recruitment and education for quite a long time now, and it doesn't mean, for any graduates that are listening to this, it doesn't mean that there aren't jobs out there for you, because there are, like Jon said earlier, there's a lot of movement every year. People do retire, they move on, they leave the profession, they go to the Middle East for the tax-free money. There's so many teachers that are leaving the industry. I believe in 2016 there was 48,000 teachers that left the industry, and only 26,000 new NQTs came into the industry. So that left us with about a 21,000 deficit. There is a massive demand for teachers, whatever your subject may be, but just don't lose faith. I think it's very important that you stick to it. If you're passionate, you will find a job to become as a teacher. We've got the schools. There is a massive shortage of good quality teachers, and it's so important for graduates to think of teaching as a career for them, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, definitely, and it's a great career. It's a great career. And if people out there are thinking about it, see if you can. It's tough at the moment. What I'm about to say would have happened a year ago. Whether it happens now, I don't know. But I was going to say, get in and volunteer in a school, go in and spend some time. And at the moment, I know that's going to be really, really tough. But whatever you can do to kind of see about that, because it is a great career and it's a very rewarding career. So yeah, certainly don't be put off by things. And ultimately, if you're good enough, then you'll get in and you'll do really well.
Fantastic. Jon, you've obviously gone through a lot with us today, right? And obviously, I don't want to keep you too long, but in terms of your books, right? Why is it important for any? I'm not obviously going to be a little bit biased, but I don't want you to be modest here, right? Why is it important for new teachers in the industry to to read your book and for it to benefit their career?
Well, my new book, Teaching Rebooted, is all about kind of using educational research to understand what works. And the reason I wrote it is I was really frustrated that I'd come through my career nearly 15, 20 years in, and suddenly I was finding out about what worked in a classroom and the research, really hard-edged research about what really works with students on how we learn, how we remember things. And I'm not just talking about students here, human beings, how we retain information, the best way to learn things. And some of the research was from, Ebbinghouse's forgetting curve, 1885, research from the 50s, the 60s, the 70s. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, I started teaching 20 years ago. This information might have been really useful to me back then. It also might have been useful for my teachers that taught me when I started school in 1988, because none of this is really new. So I was really frustrated because I was reading it and thinking, why didn't I know this before? And I thought, well, maybe it was because I came through the graduate teacher program and it wasn't a normal traditional route into teaching and I'd missed it somehow. And as I started kind of gaining some confidence and whispering to people, because I thought, well, maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm the only person that hasn't read this before. And I'm like the imposter in the staff room. And as I started having the confidence to speak to people, people were saying, yeah, I didn't know that either. Wow, is that right? I didn't know that. And I thought, gee whiz, why are we at a stage where this research hasn't made it into the staff rooms, into the classrooms? And so I wrote the book out of frustration. And I really made sure that it was written, again, thinking about my audience, that it was easily readable from either a trainee teacher or an NQT all the way up to a head teacher. Because what I want to do was, what I feel I'm doing at the moment is retraining people and training them out of bad habits that they learn through folklore rather than through science. And I want to make sure that we are training people at the point of entry into the profession, so that they're getting and understanding the research and what works for real learning at that point, rather than to retrain them 10, 15, 20 years in. So I wrote it for that reason. And the first couple of chapters actually talk about why we're not at this stage and why research hasn't made it into the classrooms. And there's a lot of reasons, things like it's very academic in its nature. It's very long, 100-page reports written with lots of big words in that, people like me who've got C-grade English go, whoa, what was that? I didn't really understand that. We're having to read it twice, 3 times and think, hang on a second, and we all read things that way. You just think, what's it going on about? So I've tried to really distill that into really succinct, easy to understand kind of points, and also talk about what the things we've done wrong over time. So I've split each chapter into Teacher 1.0, so things that we used to do, then what the research says, and then Teacher 2.0, which is 4 practical ways to put it into your classroom. But there's lots of things I talk about, like confirmation bias. That we go out of our way to read things online that already align with our beliefs. And if we think that, let's say, I don't know, let's imagine you've always sat kids in rows in your classroom. If you read an article that says that sitting in rows is great, then you will read that and you'll go, yeah, see, I told you, I agree with that. So, because it confirms your beliefs.
Yeah.
When you read one that says group works best, it's very easy to go, yeah, but that was written in London, or that was written in Shanghai, or yeah, but they don't teach. I bet they don't teach my kids, because we dismiss that very quickly because it's not what we already believe in.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure we understand that we have a confirmation bias, and we can detach ourselves from that a little bit, and we can actually take on 2 points of view and opinion, and then make the right choice. And Twitter is quite dangerous for that, because you can choose to follow who you want to and block who you want to. There is a danger that we follow like-minded people who share the same beliefs. So we live in an echo chamber, and we come into school and say, well, everyone says it on Twitter. Yeah, everyone that you follow, who you have chosen to follow, who has maybe a same belief, might share that same belief, but that might not be representative of the whole the nation of the teaching profession. So I think that's important for us in any way, whether you're a teacher or not, to have that understanding that we have that confirmation bias. And if we live in an echo chamber, then that can be quite dangerous. We almost believe our own hype. And it's important to get that kind of acid and alkaline, those kind of different counterbalances and checks to make us stop and reflect and think on things from a different point of view.
Yeah, it's really interesting that. I mean, like a lot of people that aren't in teaching, they'd probably think you stand in front of the classroom, talk to the kids for an hour, and obviously just they'll learn and pass their exams. I mean, there's so much more to that, isn't there? And anybody that's watching that hasn't picked up this book, I mean, I've only heard really positive things about it from everyone in the profession that I've spoken to who's read it. Please buy his book. I mean, especially if you're at the beginning of your career, it will definitely help enhance your practice, the way you think, and just the way that you build rapport with the students. I think it will be massive for you guys. I mean, thank you so much, Jon, for coming on. Is there any last bit that you want to talk about that's important to you? I mean, we've covered quite a lot, but is there any last bit that you want to say?
No, I think it's just getting across that, like I say, from a recruitment point of view, that teaching is a fantastic profession to be in. I've really enjoyed everything I've done in there. It's opened up so many doors and opportunities for me, and sticking into it and making sure you're highly organised, and understanding what works from the start. Let's not spend our time on things that don't work. Let's understand and be efficient on what actually works. And it's not just about following the science like a robot. It's about taking your skills, your context, your different things, and then also the research about what works and making sound decisions on what you're going to use in your classroom. It is a craft. We get better at it all the time, as long as we keep reflecting and we keep practicing. So good luck to everyone who is either in or about to join the profession, and hopefully you will follow your dreams through and have lots of promotions and end up at some point with hopefully maybe somewhere, if you want to, in somewhere like senior leadership. I mean, some people don't want to, they want to stay in the classroom, but whatever you want to achieve, I hope you achieve in education.
Fantastic. And just so anybody that isn't following you at the moment, where can they find you on social media, Jon?
You can find me on Twitter at Team Tait, TEAMTAIT, Team Tait, on LinkedIn, Jon Tait. And you can find me there. And if you're looking for my books, you'll be able to see them on my headers of my social media pages. Or if you head over to Amazon or Bloomsbury on their website and just put in Jon Tait in Amazon, and you'll see, or Jon Tait Bloomsbury, and you'll see my books pop up there. Great.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Jon. Thanks for coming on. And I really appreciate everything that you've said today.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
No worries.